Hi guys, welcome back to Miss E's class. I wonder how y'all are doing today. Hi guys, welcome back to Miss E's history class. I'm Miss E if you don't remember me from yesterday. Hope y'all are doing well. If you haven't already, go ahead and put your sticky note up on the board. It looks like we have everyone. So we have Ryan who guessed this tall, and then we have Serenity, you guessed about that tall. So Napoleon's height, who can take a guess? 5, okay, 4, he's not 4 foot. He was 5'6", so I'm 5'4", so probably my pen's 2 inches, so for my height, well, I think honestly my pen's a little bit too long, but he's definitely around my height, so I know we have our stereotypes, but yes, he was considered a little bit shorter, but he was definitely a man that we're going to learn about today, if you already couldn't tell from our board. So just really quick, let's get some reviews out, and whoever gets the correct question will get a pencil from me that is from a college from around San Antonio. Oh, I know, we love pencils. All right, can anyone explain what imperialism is? Not quite Serenity. Let's try Ryan. What do you think? Good. Can we get more of a definition? Awesome, Hector. Good. So, imperialism. This is from the Webster Dictionary. It is the policy, practice, or advocacy of extending the power and domain of a nation, especially by direct territorial acquisitions or by gaining indirect control over the political or economic life of other areas, aka a dictator. So don't ever be that. All right. Who can tell me who is the French military general of the French Revolutionary War? He's up on the board. Good, Hector, right. Well, Hector, not correct. Was Napoleon. Which Napoleon? Not Dynamite. Good, Nicole. Yes, Napoleon Bonaparte. Good. So I want y'all to make sure you're getting the full names, okay? Because just because you say Napoleon, people will... It's a broad spectrum, you know? My friend Napoleon, my friend Napoleon wasn't born in the 1400s, you know? So got to make sure you're doing that. All right, what were the 13 colonies? Can anyone tell me what they were? You don't have to list the names, just tell me what they were. Good, Rose. Yes, so they were the British colonies that settled along the Atlantic coast, and they declared independence from, not the French, the British. Yes, the British in 1776, okay? They said, peace out, King George, and they went on to America. All right. Who was the first postmaker general of America? Yes, the first postmaker of the first postmaker of America was Benjamin Franklin, believe it or not. He's not as smart as he seems to be, but we're going to learn about that in our next lesson. Lastly, which revolution lasted from 1789 to 1799 and was heavily, not heavenly, influenced by the American Revolution? Good. French Revolution. Right. So that's what we're going to be learning about today, along with learning who Napoleon Bonaparte was. Napoleon Bonaparte had a very, very, very huge involvement in the French Revolution, and we're going to kind of see what he did. So good. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to watch a video, and after that, we're going to make sure y'all are taking notes also during the video. It does have a little bit of we're going to have a little bit discussion afterwards. Before we do that, though, the weather is up on the board. If you haven't already seen, it's like very cold when y'all get to school, and then all of a sudden it's like blazing hot. Welcome to Texas if you haven't already been here. Also this weekend it's supposed to be the same exact thing, but who knows? Texas kind of has its mind of its own, so who knows? So the questions to think about today are, would you fight alongside Napoleon? So you personally, I want you to think about that today. At the end of the class, we're going to have a little exit sheet, so that will be able to answer that. Your second question is, what type of leader would you label him? Would you label him a great leader? Would you label him a dictator? Would you label him a president? What type of leader? So our president, what would you label him as? Would you label him as a great leader? Stuff like that to make good connections, okay? So our jokes of the day, just to get a little chuckle in y'all, is, wow, he's so cool. And it's like little bottles of drinks talking to a cooler because he's cool. Haha, knee slapper right there. And then our last one is a deer saying, I'm going to fight you with my bare hands. And then the bear responds, oh dear. Because the bear fighting a deer. No, okay, so I'll get new jokes next week. But let's go ahead and watch this video. Take out your notebooks while I get prepared. Yes, there will be possibly a pop quiz on this next week. You might want to take very good notes. Don't worry, we will go over it after the video.
Today we're going to talk about the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon Bonaparte is an extremely controversial figure. Some scholars see him as the man who led France out of the chaos that was the French Revolution, and went on to take down their enemies. Others see him as a man who seized control during political instability, a militaristic, power-hungry dictator whose reign saw millions of soldiers and civilians killed.
So, before I continue with the video, notice that word dictator. We're going to be hearing that a lot today. Does anyone need me to kind of make connections with it? Good, Nicole. Yes, the connection with it was imperialism. So that's a really good connection. Keep that connection. Anyone else need me to make a connection for you? So a good nowadays leader to be called a dictator, and we're okay with calling him a dictator, it would be like North Korea's dictator. He's very controlling, doesn't really let the his people do much at all, and he doesn't really let them see the outside world. So that's how you should think of Napoleon. But of course, Napoleon in the 1700s versus our dictator in North Korea, it's different times, so it could have evolved. So a dictator then might be a little bit different now. So pay a little bit more attention to find out what type of dictator Napoleon was.
So how exactly did Napoleon take power in the first place? Before the French Revolution, the French government was divided into three broad classes: the clergy, the nobility, and the third estate, or everyone else. France had supplied financial aid during the American Revolution, and was now in an economic crisis. King Louis XVI placed heavy taxes upon the peasants, who were starving and suffering from bread shortages. Furthermore, a movement known as the Enlightenment began to question the hierarchy of government, and whether the king was truly chosen by God to rule. The Enlightenment promoted reason and science, and these ideas soon spread to the nobility and wealthy businessmen. In 1789, King Louis XVI called together these representatives from these classes to meet at the Estates General. Unable to make an accord on anything, the Third Estate left and formed their own National Assembly. The king disagreed with these actions.
So, before I go on, does this sound familiar? Yeah, what we learned about the American Revolution, right? It sounds very similar to what's happened when they're going through their revolution. Literally, they followed directly behind America. So right after America had theirs, France was like, especially Lafayette, who fought in the American Revolution, went back to France, was a major pusher for independence. So a lot of the stuff is pretty much the same path, but they don't exactly have the same ending, especially for Napoleon.
Resulting in riots throughout Paris. On the 14th of July, 1789, the revolution stormed the Bastille fortress, freeing half a dozen prisoners and seizing weapons and ammunition. The National Assembly abolished feudalism and formed a new constitution. The revolution had begun.
Pause in the lesson. I just want to go ahead and say I'm not going to play the whole video just because I rather do my whole lesson, so they would watch the rest of the video. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my PowerPoint. All right, guys, I'm so glad y'all are very engaged after that video. Good group discussion. Awesome. Keep those questions in mind if you still have some more. Don't worry, we'll definitely have time after the PowerPoint. Go and get back out your notebooks if you still don't, if you put them away. We're going to take some notes. So, a quote that I want y'all to know from Napoleon is, if I can get my paper straight, never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Okay, so the way to normalize that is, if your enemy's making a mistake, why interrupt him? He has that straight process. You know, when you're in a good thought process, you want to keep going. Why do you want to be interrupted? If you get interrupted, you might second guess. So always think about that, okay? So, Napoleon Bonaparte. While Napoleon was in Costa Rica, the French Revolution took place in Paris, France. So he wasn't quite there just yet. People of the French revolted against the King of France and took total control of the country by killing the royal family and his people. Can anyone make connections with that? Good. It's kind of like the family in Russia, right? People often storm and think that killing our leaders is the best option. It's not. But just to make a little connection, that's something to think about, okay? When Napoleon arrived, he was joined by a radical group of revolutionaries who called themselves the Jacobins. In 1793, he then was positioned as the artillery commander in the siege of Toulon. So if anything you need to make sure you take is that he was the artillery commander. He wasn't just yet the general commander, okay? He defeated British troops and the Navy and took total control of Port City and Toulon, okay? By the age of 24, guys. I'm 22 and this guy's 24 doing all this stuff. And I'm here. Like, that's crazy, isn't it? By the age of 24, he was promoted to the position of Brigadier General, which is right below Major General. So by 24, he was vice president of the whole military. Can y'all believe that? By 24, I think I barely graduated college. All right. So, when Napoleon returned to France, it was in 1799. The Directory, which was the French government's name, they didn't call themselves the government, or like we call it the executive or the judicial or stuff like that. They were called the Directory. They were called the Directory. Wink, wink. But they were losing power very fast. So to remember that, the director got fired. The Directory was losing power. Napoleon formed a new government alongside with his allies and his brother. So they called it the consulate. Okay, so that's something else you might want to take notes on because that will be on your final exam. I can tell you that right now. Napoleon gave himself the title of the first consul, which basically made him the dictator of France. Now, how would you feel if I walked in here, you didn't know who I was? You had a different history teacher. You had Miss Rose. I walked and I was like, all right, I'm the history teacher. Would you like that? Okay, but get this. What if I had an awesome resume? I was named Teacher of the Year for the past 20 million years. And I just won a war. Would you be okay with it? Stuff to think about, okay? So, in Europe, since Napoleon had lost naval battle against the Britain, the Battle of Trafalgar, he attacked in Austria, He attacked in Austria, which is in Europe. Napoleon successfully defeated Austrians and the Russian armies in 1805 in the Battle of Austerlitz. Napoleon extended his empire, and by 1811, he controlled Europe from Spain all the way around the Russian border. So that's not including Britain. He did not control Britain. And Russia, that was kind of Napoleon's Mario. That was Napoleon's downfall. This is where he really he was walking off the cliff and then poof, he just took a straight dive down. So by 1812, he decided to march with a huge army to Russia. He's like, you know what, we're doing so good, let's keep going. Many of the army could not survive, though, with the harsh winter conditions, and many of them starved to death. People forget that these are humans. Even animals need to eat, okay? So if you're going to take your armies all the way to Russia, and one, they're not used to the cold weathers that happen there, and two, they're not eating, you have no meat to keep you warm, and also you're just cold. I hate the cold. I've been to Chicago like 3 times, still can't stand it. They're forced to desert Moscow. However, the city